This episode is going to deal with some pretty heavy stuff,
including suicidal ideation, depression, mental illness, etc.
And we urge you to seek professional help if those are things you're struggling with.
And if you're not in the mood to watch or listen to that today, that's totally fine.
We giggle a lot less in this episode than usual.
Yeah, it's a little heavy. So stick around next Monday if you want a little bit more of a laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't be hurt if you don't want to.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah,
we love you.
We love you.
Can I say something vulnerable?
Yeah.
I am currently on 3 psychiatric meds every single day. And I feel ashamed. But it also changed my life.
It gave you your life back.
It gave me my life back, and I've been wanting to talk about this because if I could go back in time and tell 16-year-old me that it's okay to take meds, it doesn't mean you're broken or there's something wrong with you. Like, I feel like I would have got my life back 10 years ago.
What were your misconceptions before getting on them? Because I hear a lot of it'll change my personality or it'll take away my sparkle, and it's girl, the sparkle is depression.
Right. It's girl, is it a sparkle or is it a literal mental illness?
Yeah.
I think, wait, is this how, should I start over?
Why?
I feel nervous.
I think you might feel nervous recording
You're
this
right.
one.
You're right.
Because it's a vulnerable episode.
It is. I'm also not wearing makeup. Spoiler alert if you're not watching the visual one. So feeling like the most vulnerable ever on this ep. Yeah, I think that I talked to my therapist a lot about this, and I want to kind of rehash my entire mental health journey in this episode, but I was diagnosed with bipolar 2, which still debatable. One thing about me, I don't really believe anything. I also think I'm straight still a little bit. There's a lot going on there, but anyway, that's a lot to unpack. She said a lot of people with bipolar are really anti-meds because mania is so productive, and people on the internet get really mad when I say mania is fun, and obviously there's a difference between mania and hypomania. Mania is a lot more actually dangerous and can be life-threatening.
And what is hypomania?
Hypomania is just a little bit of a toned down version where you're just can't sleep and you're having racing thoughts and maybe you're talking a lot more than normal or a little bit more social, but you're not hallucinating or doing insanely risky things.
Yeah, and our world rewards productivity and extroversion, so sometimes hypomania feels oh my god, I'm killing it right now.
Right. And I always described it because when you're depressed, because the thing about bipolar 2 is it's more heavily depressed, whereas bipolar 1 is you're usually more manic more often.
Okay.
So when you're depressed for so long, when you are hypomanic, you kind of it feels like you're making up for lost time.
Got it.
So for me, I always use the metaphor that it was kind of how a snake eats. You know how they eat once a month, a whole ass mouse, a whole mouse, and it's just in their throat, and then they're just digesting it for a month.
Yeah.
Instead of eating every day like a normal person.
Have you ever seen the Modern Love episode with Anne Hathaway?
Yeah, that changed. That shit rocked my world.
Yeah.
I love that episode. It's so real. That's
so
exactly
well
how I felt. I made
Yeah.
my mom watch it. I made my therapist watch it. That was the first time I was oh my god, the way that I feel is represented in media so well. You feel like a different person. And when I was hypomanic, I literally felt special. I don't know, I felt so confident. You kind of have a god complex a little bit. And so I just a lot of people, according to my therapist, I don't have statistics to back this up, but don't want to lose that, so you just don't take meds. And I also think that when you spend your whole life kind of with the ups and downs, the thought of being stable is so boring. You know, and you think that when I first got on meds, I was kind of freaking out because I was I'm not crying every day, and when I'm happy, I'm not staying up all night thinking about how happy I am. I'm kind of just regular, and I think I'm numb. And she was I don't think this is numb, I think this is just stability.
Yeah.
And you're just not used to it.
I am wary of making metaphors or analogies here, but does it almost feel after a really toxic relationship with high highs and low lows, being in something stable?
Exactly.
And you're I don't really know if I'm in love. I don't ever feel I want to strangle them or I want to
throw
Yeah,
up from the butterflies.
Yeah.
And you're
And
like,
then
this must not be normal.
people are like, no, I think
That's healthy.
healthy, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of, and now I'm like loving my stable life.
I'm so happy.
Thank
That's so
you.
good.
But should we go back to the beginning?
Let's go back to the beginning, wherever you want to start.
Well, I was so bullied in school. Were you? You weren't, because you went to an all-girls school. But middle school.
I wasn't really bullied. There were like mean girls.
Yeah.
But I don't think I was like strongly bullied.
Okay. I was like pretty badly bullied in middle school. And I think that maybe was the catalyst for a lot of it for me. And then high school was like, I think when I first experienced depression, like I would like come home every single day from school and like take a really long nap. Like I anytime I wasn't at school, I wanted to be asleep, which I thought was just like normal.
Even till pretty recently, I feel like sleep is my
escapism.
Escape, yeah.
That's always like how my depression has manifested. And I remember like I lost a lot of friends because people thought that I didn't want to hang out with them. And it's like I didn't have the vocabulary to explain why it was so hard for me to like socialize and like do things. I thought that I was just a tired girl. I was like, I'm just exhausted. My mom would yell at me for napping. Like everyone was like, why is Madeline always asleep? And I also didn't know. And yeah, I just like nothing excited me. Like I was just like depressed. I don't think mental health was a big thing in my family. I think primarily because like we didn't have a lot of money, and so I don't think like my mom and her siblings didn't go to like the dentist or the doctor growing up. Like mental health was the last of their problems. Of course, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if they did have money to go to the doctor, it was going to be like for your body, not for your brain. So I think I was never given like tools, or like it wasn't really like normalized around me.
Yeah, it really wasn't a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I really don't think till like maybe 6 or 7 years ago it was even part of the broader cultural conversation.
Yeah, that's so true.
Forget if you had the money or resources.
Right. Like therapy was kind of like, it was
very
kind of
stigmatized.
Like you're like crazy, or there's something wrong with you, or
Absolutely.
it's embarrassing.
Even in like, I think so many immigrant communities, it's like just work harder, be better, work harder,
exactly,
get over it.
Yeah. And your parents love to be like, well, I'm depressed and anxious and look at me, I'm fine. It's like, okay, girl.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's something to brag about.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. Just because you're like able to suffer through doesn't mean you have to or should have to. So yeah, that's just kind of like to set the scene. So I went through high school, I went through college. It was just like always the same, like depression, and then the bursts of energy and productivity that would kind of like felt like it all canceled out. And then I think that like things really got revved up for me during COVID. And maybe I'm just like glossing over it because my memory is really bad because I was asleep most of my life. So during COVID, I lived with an ex-partner of mine. And I was just forced to think, as we all were. And like I was just so severely suicidal and depressed, and I just like, I don't know, I just like constantly felt like there was something wrong with me. Mostly, especially like socially, because like people want to go out, people want to make friends, people like have this energy to like do things for fun, and I would like only do things I absolutely had to do, and any other time I was asleep. And I was like, I would constantly go to the doctor, get like my thyroid checked, my iron levels. I was like, there's literally something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure it out.
How did you communicate to your partner at the time? What was going on?
I think that I don't think anyone in my life was super helpful, which I don't think is their fault, but like they were very much like, I mean, like my partner, my parents, so many people were like, okay, well, no one wants to get out of bed. You just kind of have to do it. Like you need to start getting up. You need to start doing this. And that would make me feel even worse about myself.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm just like mentally weaker than everyone else. Like everyone feels this way. And I'm just like a lesser person because I can't push through and get out of bed. Like I just thought there was something wrong with me. And also I forgot to mention, so the first time I ever went to therapy, have you been to therapy? You have, right?
I've tried it because it was free for me at a lot of different institutions. And we can get into that maybe
Okay.
in another episode. But
Okay.
I just don't think it's ever worked for me.
Yeah,
and
therapy is, it's like not for everyone.
I also think it's kind of like dating, and you have to find the right person. And
Mhm. Unfortunately, not all therapists are great at their job. I've had a lot of experiences in this regard.
And I don't want to say anything and like disparage
No.
it as a whole, because I really think it's so important and critical.
Therapy has also changed my life, and it's
Yeah.
also like per person. Like,
Very
I'm
much
sure
so.
the therapists I don't like or have had bad experiences with, some people would like love them.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a really traumatizing experience where, trigger warning, kind of, like I was sexually assaulted. I went through that breakup. I went through like eating problems. Like I was in such a dark place when I was 21. I just turned 21.
And it's kind of coming at you from all angles.
And I was like, I need help. Like, I'm not okay. Like, I was freaking out. And a lot of it, like the sexual assault and all these things, I had so much shame around that I didn't talk to anyone. And I was like, I'm going to throw up if I can't just tell someone this. Like, I was like, I need to get this off my chest. So I begged my parents to let me go to therapy, because my parents were very much like, girl, get a journal. You don't need to go to therapy.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, guys, you don't understand. I need to go to therapy.
And I think that generation also had a different amount of pressure put on them.
Totally.
Right? And when you're like trying to put food on the table,
Yeah.
you're less concerned with like how happy am I
Exactly.
about this. And it's just really complicated, and you can't even blame anyone for
No.
their own preconceived notions about mental health.
Yeah,
And,
not at all. It was just like, and also me not being open about why I needed it, because I was so ashamed. I'm sure just like didn't help the situation. But I finally got a therapist. I was so nervous. It's also hard to find a therapist. I didn't know what I was doing.
It's really
It's
hard.
confusing. Like, people, I don't know. I wish there was like a better way to find a therapist, but I finally found one. I drove to her office. I went there, and I first session crying. Like, it felt so, I was so excited. I had been holding so much in for so long that I was just like, bleh, like word vomit, crying, everything. And when I was talking specifically about the sexual assault, she kind of like blamed me and said things that were really triggering, and it freaked me out, because it was kind of all of my worst fears and the reason I hadn't told anyone in my family or
Was
life,
for that reaction.
because I was like, okay, well, a therapist is a trained professional who will know how to handle this.
And a lot of trained I mean, that's
It's just like unfortunate. And also, like, you have to keep in mind like your environment. Like, I was in the suburbs of Illinois. I feel like it was kind of like maybe there was some kind of religious undertone at this therapy place I went to. So I think she was like, I don't know. I don't blame her, and I don't think it was on purpose, but like, I am someone who's so sensitive to judgment that like her face and her reactions and the questions she was asking me, I was like, oh, I'm never telling anyone about this again.
Yeah.
Ever.
And the first person you tell, I think, has the most power.
Yeah.
Because it shapes the way you think everyone will react.
Exactly.
In so many ways. And
Exactly.
like, they have their own biases, but you're not thinking about that, because you're like, this is a professional.
Right.
And if a professional thinks this, then it must be true, and that must be the reality about me. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It just like, I never went to another session. That was it. And then I was like, okay, I am the problem. This was my fault. I'm just like broken, and there's something wrong with me, and I'm just gonna like suck it up. So didn't go to therapy again for a long, long time until COVID came. I was like, I had always been kind of passively suicidal, which I will say right now in my life, I like never think about killing myself. Also, sorry if this is triggering. We should
Well,
probably
we're going to
put
add like a really extensive trigger warning
in the
at
beginning. Yeah. I just like never think about killing myself anymore. And that like is crazy to me, because I used to think about it every single day, not in a way where I was like planning anything. It was just like a passive thought, like, oh, wish I was dead. And I thought that everyone thought that every single day. So now when I don't, I'm like, it's just like crazy to me.
Does it almost feel like you were robbed of decades of your life? You're like, I can't believe people can just go around living their life not thinking that, and all that brain space is then opened up to like other things,
Yes.
including love and joy.
Yeah. I feel like there was such a grieving process when I
Yeah.
found out what life can be like, that it wasn't like that for me for so long. And I also hope I don't sound like I'm like the only depressed person in the world.
You
like
don't. Let's try to not do any qualifications.
Okay, sorry.
Tell
Thank
your
you.
story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So really the most, like, I was like, actually, like, if I could figure out a way to go to sleep and never wake up, I would. Like, it was like really bad. I was so unhappy. And there's so many things I've never talked about to anyone that kind of like led to that maybe when I get comfy in the KISS community, I would love to talk about, because I feel like my whole thing is like, at least hopefully the bad things I went through I can like help people with, maybe. Like, that's kind of been the only positive takeaway I've had from like depression and stuff, is like, okay, well, I know what it's like, so I can talk to other people that are struggling. But anyway, yeah, so I was really, really miserable, and I finally got another therapist because I was like, I am gonna like kill myself, like I have to get help. And my partner at the time was also like, you aren't okay. And like I kind of, I wouldn't say I was like putting it on them, but they were the only person I talked to. And I'm sure when every single day your partner is telling you how bad they want to die, that's probably like really overwhelming.
Yeah.
When you're not a professional and you don't know what to say, it's like, it's really hard to talk to people who are depressed, because like, what do you say, you know, because you don't want to give them advice, but you don't want to just like let them suffer.
And you don't want to say the wrong thing,
right? Because it's so sensitive. It was just like probably really hard for him. So he urged me to get therapy. I found a therapist. Obviously it was online because of COVID. And like, this therapist was so gentle. She was the perfect person for this version of me, because like all she did was like try and get me to get through the week, you know, like it was very gentle. All I really needed was like validation that like, this sucks. And that's always what I try to think about, like what I would tell people who are depressed, or what I would kind of recommend like friends or family of depressed people to say. Literally just validate that like, this fucking sucks. Getting out of bed is so hard right now. Like, that's okay. Like, it's so okay. Like, I just needed someone to tell me like, this is what depression feels like, and it's normal in terms of like, you're not the only person,
and you're not morally bad.
Yes, exactly. You're not lazy. That was like a big thing. Like, I just like needed someone to tell me it was okay, and she did, and it was sweet. And we would like make little action plans for like when I wanted to kill myself, and like it felt really safe. And she was like, girl, you need to get on meds. Like, she wasn't like, you need to, but she was like, you don't need to live like this. Like, this is textbook depression. My whole thing was constantly like, I don't think I'm depressed, I think I'm just lazy. Like, I think I'm just like sleepy and lazy constantly. Like, still to this day, I make my therapist remind me that depression is real, and it's not just me being lazy,
and it's not a choice that you can wake up and make,
like, will myself out of. That's how it constantly felt.
And I think especially talking to maybe the couple generations above us, where it's very much like, no one wants to work these days, like, get up and work. And when we were prepping for this episode, we knew it was going to be like your story, and I don't want to do anything but be able to be scaffolding, but I was looking up a little bit about depression and laziness, and I came across so much content about how laziness is like so obviously rooted in capitalism and classism, and is a way for rich people to kind of look down on poor people and say if they just worked harder and if they weren't as lazy, they could be where I am now, right? And it makes them feel less guilty maybe about all the wealth they're accumulating. That's me saying that. That's not something else. But laziness became like a popular term of control around the time of slavery, because slaves weren't given financial incentives. So then it was like, your worth is measured in productivity. And I have like, so, you know, I love talking about self-worth, and I have so many thoughts about self-worth, and our culture just ties that so much to productivity when it's not
at all. And
there are a lot of like misconceptions about that, and a lot of people spreading kind of horrible misinformation online
that's really harmful.
And it doesn't help depressed people at all, because they think, oh, so this is just me and there's something wrong with me.
It's feeding the narrative that they're lazy. And even if you are quote unquote lazy, like, sometimes I would argue I'm not depressed anymore. Sometimes I want to sleep on my couch all day because I don't dream of labor. I don't want to sit around and work all day. Sometimes I want to hang out with my friends and chill, and I think that's okay too. Which we can talk, like, productivity and like the capitalism of it all. So yeah, laziness was like a big thing, and I feel like a lot of people in my life would describe me as lazy at that time, because I would sleep all day and lay in my bed and not do anything. So like, of course, like, that's kind of the word we use to describe that. So yeah, went through that. she kind of urged me to look into medicine, and my whole thing with medicine was like, well, first of all, people in my family, like no one in my family had been on anything. Like I didn't really know anyone who took meds, and the people I would talk to, like I remember we had some friends at the time who had like tried antidepressants, and they're like, oh, like it's so miserable getting on, and you get brain zaps, and it's so hard to get off, and you're dependent, and it's just like the scariest stories about antidepressants. I was terrified of them. I was like, you couldn't pay me enough money. I'd rather suffer.
Yeah, and I think there's so many really valid critiques of big pharma in America.
Totally. That's the other thing.
Which should then get intertwined with a lot of the messaging around antidepressants. And big pharma has made a ton of mistakes, and I'm never like going to bat for them.
No.
But science is real.
Science is real.
You know?
That's the thing. That was my other whole thing. And like my mom is like a very like, she's a Pisces. She's very like holistic, natural, like, oh, why don't you just go for a walk? And like not intended in a malicious way. Just also because I was like, yeah, big pharma just wants to take my money. The government just wants to make me this like productive worker. Like maybe this is just how I am. Like I don't want to like I was just like, what does the government know about? I don't know. I didn't trust them.
Yeah, and I want to say something here, which is like there's been now so many studies on SSRIs, and there's like this huge one out of Australia recently, and it shows that like dance and yoga and hot yoga and exercise are all really, really great at combating depression. But there is a note in that study that says sometimes it's hard to get to that step without the help of antidepressants.
Exactly.
And the highest levels of improvement are shown in people who can do both. You can be on the SSRIs and then be exercising or dancing or like going on a walk or whatever that may be. But that first hurdle to get out of bed is the one that feels the most impossible to overcome, to do any of that. Yeah.
Right. And if you could, the thing is, depression is so miserable. If you could will yourself out of it, I promise you would. Like, that's what people don't get. If I could get out of bed, I promise I would.
Yeah, if you see everyone else having friends, you're not just like you want that too.
Right. It's not like I want to be depressed. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go on so many side tangents. I'm like so passionate about this, but God, people said the most hurtful, like problematic things to me when I was depressed. I remember I had this friend, and this was a huge reason we aren't friends anymore, is like the way she talked about my depression, where she would just be like, I think you're finding a lot of identity in being depressed, and I think you're like kind of making yourself depressed because you just like have decided you're a depressed person, and maybe you should just decide you're not a depressed person anymore. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so it's all my fault basically. Like it felt like so many things people said was, it's your fault in more words, if that makes sense. And it like made me so freaking mad. I'll get there later. But yeah, I was scared I would lose my personality. I was scared of gaining weight. I was scared of not being hypomanic anymore and having these little fun bursts of productivity and a God complex, like all of it. And I would big on Reddit, love Reddit over here personally. People on Reddit are really scary because you don't really feel compelled to go write in a think piece on the internet when you're like, yeah, I took it and it was fine and it helped me. You feel compelled when it's like, and then I got brain zaps and then this happened and I need to tell someone, so it's like the outliers on the internet, but that's all you're reading. So I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not taking this. That's crazy. And I went through a period where I was like, I would take like ashwagandha. I was like, maybe I'll try microdosing shrooms. I would Google like ketamine infusions. Like I would do anything other than just take an antidepressant, which is so funny now that I'm on them, and it was like literally so fine. I just built it up to be like the scariest thing in the world. And then, yeah, I went through a breakup, moved out of that apartment, finally found a new therapist. I'm like brushing over things because there's not much to tell. I was in my bed sleeping every day all day, wanting to die. Like that was it. And finally found a new therapist who like changed my life. She's like still my therapist, the most wonderful woman alive. We love her. Like ride or die for this woman. And it's really inspiring because first of all, she was the first person to suggest that I have bipolar 2. Everyone else just said I was depressed. And she was like, I feel like you either have PMDD or bipolar 2, which it's still not like 100%. I feel like there's a lot of overlap in women. But my therapist also has bipolar 2. I'm not saying her name, so I don't feel bad like disclosing that information, because she's like very open about it. But seeing a real happy person
with a full life,
a job, she's passionate, she's funny, she's all these things, have this and also be on meds for it and tell me it's going to be okay, was like one of the biggest things that helped me. And that's like always kind of what I wanted to do with my content when I started making mental health content. I mean, I started when I was in the thick of it, so it wasn't really like inspiring, but it's just like to see you're not alone.
I actually think it's really inspiring because something we talk about often is, I think even still on the internet, like mental health is like this big buzzword, but if people are in the throes of it, it's not sexy. If people are talking about it after, I was like, this is the thing I overcame, people love it, like that's going viral.
A little success story.
People love that. People don't like seeing the thick of it.
People don't like the truth of it, where it's like, I haven't brushed my teeth in 2 weeks. It's like not sexy, it's not quirky, it's not fun, like
No.
And it's like shameful. Like I still am ashamed to talk about some of the things just the ways I lived when I was depressed. It was awful. Like it's like an illness for a reason. It's not just like, it's not even just how I'm painting it out to be like sleeping in my bed, not showered, not brushing my teeth, not drinking water, holding my pee as long as I can so that I don't have to get up. Vibes, which is like not sexy.
And I think like now also online there's a lot of content about like, I want to know your thoughts on this because I don't think we've ever discussed it, but like I'm depressed and I'm sad, and it's always the kind of people who go viral for that kind of content fit one sort of archetype
of like a beauty standard.
Where they get to look a certain way, and then it's like cute and relatable content, but if it looks different, if it looks ugly, then it's suddenly not relatable. Like
totally.
I think online it's almost like being like sad and in bed can be aspirational if you look some way and not if you look another way. And like 100%. I don't think that helps people who are on the viewership side of things.
I also, not to make it like a race thing, but I do think I've never seen a girl that isn't white do the whole like, I'm depressed, and not like to make it a bit, like I'm sure they are depressed, but like, oh, my room is so messy and it's so gross, and the comments are like, oh my god, relatable queen.
I don't think like black people, and again going back to like the history of who gets to, you know, get to the top and things like that, but I don't think they get to do that without being talked about in really, really different ways.
It's also like people who struggle with obesity, like when a skinny white girl is like, oh my god, I eat Taco Bell every single day, it's like, oh my god, relatable. But if someone who's like overweight says that, then it's like, oh my god, we are just worried about your health. It's like, are you, or is it like it's
and
like
the relatability of it is
right.
so different, and the aspiration of it is so different, and how much it's considered like okay.
Like the morality of it.
Again,
it always comes back to morality and like self-worth. I remember though, this is like, I think the first time we hung out outside of the bookstore thing, we talked about this because I was crying to you about God knows what. I was always crying back then. And you were like, well, because a big thing was like, I felt like my content was so
you
stupid.
weren't always crying also.
In my head I was.
I think you have a really distorted perception.
I think
of
so
that
too.
time.
I felt like I was constantly walking around trying not to cry. Maybe.
So from your perspective, that's what it felt like.
It felt like there's always like tears in my eyes.
To me, you were like a normal girl who was struggling. That was it.
Oh, that's really sweet. You were such a big help in me getting better also, but we can talk about that later. Friendship is so healing. But making friends when you're depressed is almost impossible.
That's the thing, is everyone's like, oh, just like go on a walk with a friend. It's like, no, I can't get to step one.
Also, like, all my friends hate me because I haven't texted them back in 3 months. Like, they probably don't actually, but that's what you're telling yourself.
And sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
That's a whole, we really want to do an episode about
friendship
while you're depressed,
struggling. Because
I think we have two very different sides of that story.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think I was crying to you about how I felt like my content was really stupid and I was so embarrassed to be like the girl who was always crying online, and you were like, I think it's really cool that you're posting about depression while you're depressed. Like that's like representation people need, or like to be seen in that way is like really cool. And I was like, oh, that like gave me a whole new perspective on it, because I felt like I had to be like this success story and I had to be inspiring.
That's the thing.
And I was like, it's not inspiring to see me not getting better for years. I was like, I also went through this thing where like I started feeling like everyone was getting sick of me being depressed. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of in Nothing New when she's like, how long will it be cute, all this crying in my room? At first it's like, oh, little Madeline, she's just kind of sad and she's sleepy. And then it's like 3 years later and I'm still crying all the time and I'm still sleeping all the time. And it's like I'm still canceling my plans and not texting you back for 3 months. And I feel like people kind of just get fed up.
I think for the first like few months we were friends, at least, you were like, you're gonna get sick of me.
Yeah.
You would tell me that all the time, like, we're gonna stop being friends. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be a good friend. I'm not like you.
Yeah.
We're almost, I think, prepping yourself.
Yeah.
For the I'm air quoting like inevitable me leaving
abandonment.
you. Yes. And I was like, no, like.
Yeah, and you really didn't, but you're like takes a certain kind of person, which I don't, and I think it's fair to have like boundaries and whatever. It's just different kinds of people. But yeah, like I really felt like people would get so sick of me and I would start trying to come up with other excuses, because it's like, how long can I just say I'm depressed? Because it felt like people thought I wasn't trying hard enough to get better, if that makes sense. It's like, why are you still sick? And I was like, why am I still sick? And I was also fed up with myself and also tired of it. So it was like just like so much shame. Yeah, so then moved here, got a new therapist, went through that breakup, which like actually was like the most soul crushing thing that's ever happened to me. Totally could talk about that another episode perhaps. But I was like a shell of a person, and my moving is like not easy. Especially it was my first time living alone. Really scary.
And you didn't again have friends.
Didn't have friends. I was like extremely codependent on my ex, who was now my ex and living elsewhere. I wasn't in a super good place with my parents. Like I was so isolated. My therapist was my only friend, and like obviously she wasn't my friend, but to me it felt like she was. And I feel like that's another, I mean, I can talk so much about like why therapy worked for me, but something that's so beautiful that my therapist would always say was like, she's like the lighthouse of hope. Because I would always go in every single session and cry and say, it's never going to get better. Everyone says it's going to get better and it gets better for them, and it's never going to get better for me. And I'm never going to stop feeling like this. And she was like, I have seen so many clients. I feel like I'm gonna cry. Like she's like, I've seen so many clients that have said that. I felt that way, and like, so I'm just like the lighthouse of hope, and you don't have to believe it and you don't have to see it, but like I'm here.
And you're someone's lighthouse of hope.
And that's what and like when I got better, she was like, now you can be that for other people.
That's so sweet.
So sweet. Yeah, but it's like that means everything. Like someone believing in it even when you don't, and letting you not believe in it and being like, that's okay.
Yeah.
It was so sweet. That shit changed my life. But anyway, she was my only person. She was my only person that like really saw me and knew how hard I was struggling, and never invalidated me, never made me feel like there was something wrong with me, never pressured me to take medicine even. Like she was like so patient with me. And then like my apartment was boxes for months. It was so sad. My bed was covered. It was like unhealthy living conditions, how I was living. I like didn't have food. I didn't have water. I was like, it felt like I was like just barely getting by, like living. Like it was awful. And existing, and I was too ashamed to tell anyone or ask for help either. So it was like so bad. I remember the first time I finally asked for help, it was probably like 6 months into me living here, and I was like, again, like actually genuinely really scared I was gonna hurt myself. So I had to go to my parents for a little bit, and I was like just like confiding in my mom for the first time, and I was like, Mom, like I am not okay and my apartment is really bad and I just like am not doing a good job taking care of myself. And she was like, okay, I can come help you. And when we came here for the first time, my mom cried because she was like, I can't believe you've been living like this. Like, it was so bad. Like, for so many months after that, she would constantly be like checking in and so anxious. She's like, you just don't know how hard as a mother it was to see that apartment that you were living in, because it was so bad.
So sad.
I'm sorry, I don't want you to cry.
No, I know.
It's
knew I was
making
gonna
me
cry.
cry. It was just really bad. And I was just like so thin because I wasn't eating. And that's another thing about antidepressants making you gain weight. I know my thoughts are boop, boop, boop all over.
They're not.
Okay. Maybe it makes you gain weight because you actually just start eating again because you like have a will to
I
live.
always tell you this.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, I think I was just not like I just was like a shell of a person.
And it is like, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It's kind of a cycle because one of the ways to feel better is to like get your body carbs and get your brain carbs.
Yes.
And like vegetables.
Right.
And
like a home cooked meal.
it actually helps, but you can't get there if you're depressed, and it's one of those things that's so cyclical.
It's awful. That's the hardest part. It's like, how do you break the cycle?
And then when you are also struggling with body issues,
Yeah.
the gaining weight makes you not want to get on antidepressants. So
Yes.
another cycle. There's like 4 you know those like things at playgrounds where you move one circle and all the
It's
other
like
what's it called?
I
should know this.
don't know either.
But those like little things move. Oh my god, that's what it is.
Exactly. It's so vicious and hard to get out of. So yeah, my mom helped me get my apartment together, and at that time, yeah, I also saw this girl. I was dating this girl, like we had a situationship for a sec, which shouldn't have been dating when I was that mentally ill. I will say I hurt a lot of people's feelings. I am a flawed character. Again, like
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I don't want this to be painted like, again, like this like cute quirky thing. It's like, no, like it was bad. Like I was hurting people's feelings. I was selfish. I was dirty. It was bad.
It's like one of those things where after addiction or
Yes.
something, you like look again, I'm speaking out of like reading other people's memoirs and stuff, but like after someone struggles with addiction, they like have to reflect and they're like, oh, I hurt people along the process, but I just wasn't myself.
Exactly. And it like doesn't make it okay. It's like so nuanced.
No, it's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
explanation.
It's an
Those are different
explanation.
things. Yeah.
So true. But yeah, I had this situationship with this girl who I also was constantly crying to, being like, I'm never gonna be happy. Like, part of the reason you want to die is because you're like, if my life is like this forever,
There's no hope. There's no light at the end of the
thought
tunnel.
of having to live another month like this is awful, let alone like 50 years. I was like, end it now. Put me out of my misery. Like, it's like, people are like, suicide is so selfish. Yeah, I guess if that's how you want to phrase it.
But also when you're like that depressed, you really can't see outside yourself.
You can't see outside of yourself.
Yeah.
It's again, like, there's a lot of nuance, and I know it's like a really sensitive topic, and I'm just speaking from like my own personal experience, but yeah, I would like cry to this girl and I was like, it's never gonna get better and I cannot live like this. And she was like, I also used to be like just like you, and it literally can get better. And I constantly thought I was the exception and I was so broken and there was something so wrong with me that it would never get better. Oh, I don't want you to be sad.
No, I'm good.
I just like
I'm so proud of you. Like,
Thank
these are
you.
happy tears.
But it's like, I cannot express enough if someone is watching and they're like, no, but it's not me. Like, I'm the exception. I'm never going to get better. Like, it's so cliche. I hate to be like, it gets better, but like, literally it actually can. I thought that I was the most depressed person. No one had ever had depression like that. It was never going to be cured. I was depressed for a decade. Like, it was awful. And she was right. And my therapist was right. Everybody was right. It gets better. And the thing that changed my life was meds. Honestly, I tried everything else. Like, to the best that I could. It's hard to try things when you can't get out of bed, like you said. But, yeah, I reached my breaking point. I was going to hurt myself. I had to go stay with my parents. And then, I finally decided to go to a psychiatrist who I was very honest with. I was like, I don't want to take these. I'm terrified. I've never taken them before. I'm very anti like meds, like blah, blah, blah. She was so patient with me. And
like, there are some really incredible healthcare professionals.
They're so sweet. And
Most
of them.
I want to say almost all, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you had one blip, but like,
right. It's like a selfless industry.
yeah, it's just so amazing.
It's so important.
to have someone who like listens and sees you and takes the time out and cares.
Yeah, because I forgot to mention, actually, there were a few times I was really depressed before this, like in the thick of the depression, where I'd go to the doctor, I'd be prescribed an antidepressant, and I wouldn't take it over and over and over. And that's another reason it felt like people in my life were giving up hope on me, because it's like, you need to do something. Like you have to like be active in trying to get out of this. So I finally started taking the meds, and this was the first time I was diagnosed with bipolar 2. And like, medicine is different, because if you have bipolar and you take an SSRI, you can just like be sent into a manic episode.
Okay.
So you have to start with a mood stabilizer. So it kind of made me feel better that like I had a therapist, because psychiatrists talk to you for like 30 minutes and then give you this medicine that's going to alter your brain,
Which is insane.
that
also
scares me.
That is also
I was like, how do you know? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Like,
have you spent enough time reading my chart?
Right. Like, I was just like, this is freaking me out, and I hated
And knowing
that.
you, I'm sure you were like, what if I'm lying? Like,
I kept saying that. I kept telling my therapist, I think I'm exaggerating.
No, I can 100% imagine you self-censoring to the point where it's like,
I was like, no, but it's fine.
you're always telling me, you're like, what if I'm straight? I'm like, girl,
That's what I was like, I don't know if people are gonna get that yet, but it's like this, like, I think that I'm a liar. Like, I think I'm an unreliable narrator of my own life.
No, I've picked that up about
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like literally thought I was lying. So because I had seen this therapist for so long, I was like, okay, I kind of trust that this woman knows that I have bipolar 2. Yeah, finally went to a psychiatrist. She prescribed me Lamictal, which, big thing about Lamictal, which is really not ideal for someone like me who's terrified of meds. They're like, oh yeah, by the way, if you get a rash, just like go to the emergency room. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, no, yeah, just like, there can be a rash.
There's so many side effects.
It's like, you have to be joking me. At first, I'm like, I'm so brave. I'm going to take this. I'm about to leave the office. And she's like, wait, no, really quick. I'm like, legally, I have to tell you this. Like, look out for a rash and go to the emergency room.
It's like birth control, where it's like a million side effects.
It's insane. But it's like, Lamictal specifically is associated with this one rash that like can be life-threatening. Of all the like meds, of course they put me on the one with the rash. So every single day I'm waking up like looking for the rash, redditing about the rash, freaking out. Never got a rash. It happens to like 0.05% of people that take it. But it was just me. Like, I was so paranoid. I had to stay with my parents while I started meds, because I was having panic attacks, constantly thinking like my brain was gonna explode. Like, I don't know what I thought was gonna happen. But yeah, I got on meds. And then I got on my antidepressants, and like, that was also trial and error. And for so long I was like, I don't want to have to go through the journey of like trial and error. That sounds exhausting. The thing about mental illness is you can't test for it. Like, you can't take a blood test and be like, you for sure have this thing, so we're going to give you this medicine that was tested. It's like, they're just guessing, going off of my word of my experience, who I don't trust myself. So that freaked me out.
And I think that also feeds into the stigma about like people are lying.
Yes,
or
totally.
making it up.
And like, women are so often not hysterical. Oh my god, that's crazy. Literally crazy. My therapist hates when I call things crazy. She's like, that's misogynistic and you're not crazy. I'm like, okay. She's such a queen for that.
I know.
But yeah, I got on meds and had to like go through the trial and error of all of it, but like slowly. It's like so not a magic fix. Obviously, like, I had to, like, therapy. I don't think I would be where I am right now without therapy on top of the meds. And it's also like, the metaphor I kind of use is like, it's like eyeglasses. Like, could I read without them? No, I literally have to put glasses on to read. It doesn't mean I don't have to read the book like everyone else. But if someone else has 20/20 vision and I'm like, there's something wrong with me, I can't read.
It's a beautiful metaphor.
And there's glasses, but you're like, no, I should just like really try to read.
What did people do before glasses? Like, the
no, and
invention
no
of
one
glasses?
talks about that.
I guess like survival of the fittest, they wouldn't make it.
Probably. Yeah, that
But then
sucks.
how did it get passed down?
Because some
Bad
people
vision.
really can't see.
No, I know. Some people really can't see. Me, I have perfect vision.
You
but
do.
Some people really
can't see. That'd be crazy. That's how it feels. It's like, yeah, I guess you could go about the world literally not seeing, or you could just put on the glasses because
Yeah.
science is amazing.
Yeah, imagine if people were like, is this real?
Right,
Like,
being
what
like,
does this mean
why
about
don't
me
you just
morally?
yeah, like why don't you just squint harder, try harder? I
Yeah.
can read, why can't you read?
Yeah.
And it's like you can't see through someone else's vision. You don't know what it's like.
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm thinking about the thumbnail. Maybe we could be in a pair of glasses.
Oh my god, wait. Maybe we could like bring
I
out a
guess
little
that like doesn't really go with Madeline's mental health right now.
No, I love
Sorry, I
it.
got really sidetracked.
Something about our thumbnails are gonna be silly goofy.
Yeah.
No, but that's always what I think about. And it's like, why wouldn't I just wear the glasses? There's nothing morally wrong with wearing the glasses. And that's what it felt like. Like, it was the first time I could get out of bed, but I still had to like work out and like take classes and make friends and do all the things that didn't magically fix my life, but it gave me the power to leave my bed, which is like putting on a pair of glasses. Is that making sense?
Of course.
It's like the most bare minimum thing you need to be able to do anything else.
Yeah.
So that was life-changing for me. And like, I don't personally, I had a lot of side effects, but they were not like to the extent that people on Reddit made it seem. Like, I survived and I'm fine and I'm still on them.
Yeah.
So like, I just like kind of wish I had got over that sooner, but obviously it just is my journey and I can't change anything now. But yeah, I had an outpatient experience, which I haven't talked about, and that was kind of like the beginning. When I got on meds, I had to also be an outpatient because I was...
Can you tell people a little bit about what outpatient is and what that means?
Yeah, so inpatient is when you have to be hospitalized, like you're not allowed to ever be alone. Outpatient is like you're kind of a little bit of a danger to yourself, but not so much that you need to be like supervised 24/7. But I would go to this facility for like 6 hours a day, and they just do like extensive therapy, and you meet with psychiatrists, and you do like group therapy, and group therapy is so incredible. Aforementioned friend who made me feel really bad about being depressed, when I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to outpatient, because my therapist had suggested it because things were getting so bad and I didn't want to live with my parents forever. It was kind of like a transition period out of that.
Of course.
My friend was like, oh, I think outpatient will be good for you because you can see that you don't actually have it that bad compared to anyone else. Like, it's going to be a wake-up call for you. That's literally what she told me.
And that's the worst thing you can hear.
And me being me, I was like,
Yeah.
no, you're right. It isn't that bad for me. I do need a wake-up call. I need to be humbled. I'm so dramatic. I'm exaggerating.
It
I'm
just
fine.
fuels all the horrible
All of it.
narratives you're already telling
All
yourself.
of it. And it did the exact opposite. Everyone there was just like me. They're regular people who have a mental illness that need a little help, and they're struggling, but I don't know, it's not like in the movies where it's like, oh, this like huge dramatic
Of
thing
course,
and
yeah.
I'm the one lying. Like, it's just regular people that need a little extra help because their brains are a little funky, and that's okay. So yeah, outpatient was incredible for me, just like having a structure, having to wake up every day, put on clothes, brush my teeth, go somewhere, and be forced to socialize. Like, I hadn't socialized that much in years. So it was like, I don't know, it was just so helpful for me.
I also think your job is so isolating.
That's also true.
Where it's something you do completely in a vacuum, right? Like, even still, now that you're like fine,
Yeah.
I like want you to have more routine and
I
more
still
schedule,
struggle with that. Yeah.
because otherwise it's like there's no accountability. Almost like you could really spend all day in your apartment and not do anything, and no one's like, oh, Madeline's missing.
You have a deadline. Yeah. It's like, no one tells me what to do.
And I really do think like routine and schedule does help.
So much. I love routine and schedule. It's hard to stick to when you don't have like external factors forcing you to, like a
Yeah.
boss or school or whatever. But it's so helpful. I think that's why outpatient like changed me. And also meeting with a psychiatrist every single day who actually knew me made me feel safer taking these meds. Like, it was just, there was a lot, but slowly but surely got my life back. After outpatient, I was like really, I think the thing with depression is like there's a constant fear in the back of your head, like, because, and my therapist always says this, it's like never gonna go away. Unfortunately, if you are someone that is just like prone to mental illness, you're always gonna have little depressive episodes, and they can be like so much less intense and so much shorter and easier to get out of, but it's depression nonetheless. And like, when I would have my first depressive episodes after being medicated, I would freak out because I was like, oh my God, it's coming back. I can't do this. Like, the fear of like feeling that way again is so intense because it's like a nightmare. It's miserable. But now it's like, just like with experience now, I'm like, okay, this sucks and it's gonna pass. And that helps so much.
Absolutely.
Because you're not feeding it with like the mind racing thoughts of it all. But yeah, where else was I gonna go with that?
I almost think of it while you gather your thoughts. Sorry I like keep interjecting with metaphors. It's just like,
you're hardly interjecting with metaphors.
I'm trying to not make sense of it, but like for people who maybe haven't gone through it to this extent, like the way I think of it and relate it back to my own life. Not that we need to like relate things back to our own life to have empathy at all, but like after your first heartbreak, you're so heartbroken and you're like, no one has ever felt this way in the history of the world. Like no one has ever felt this kind of grief. And then you kind of get heartbreak antibodies, and every breakup after, you're like, I've been through it once, I'll be able to do it again.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God, no, that's such a good metaphor. That's exactly what it's like. Because I still am depressed sometimes, but it's like, I'm not scared of it anymore. It used and like, I loved that episode of Modern Love because it's like, to me, it would feel like depression was like this scary monster that was looming that at any second could just like come and snatch me up. So I could be like the happy Anne Hathaway at the grocery store, music in my head, having a great time. And then next day, before you know it, it's gone. And it's like no control for me. Like I'm not in control at all. It was so scary. I was just like at the whim of this like depression monster in my head. And I was so scared of him and he was so mean to me. And it's also like the self-talk. Depression is like, it literally is like a voice in your head that's your own voice. Yeah. But it's so mean to you and it makes it
sinister and evil.
Sinister. It's like everyone hates you, you're the problem, you're broken, you're unlovable, you're worthless, etc., etc., etc. There's just like, it's like quicksand. It's like so hard to get out of because so much is working against you. Ugh, awful.
Were you so scared of quicksand as a kid? I was like, it's gonna get me.
Yes.
I would walk around being like, that might be quicksand. I can't walk on that side of the street. Like I was weird about it.
And where is it? I was the same way.
It's nowhere
at all.
But we were advertised it so much, and it was like, don't try to get out quick. Like you have to be. You have to go slow. Yeah. And I remember like being like, jot that down, girlfriend. Like,
no, same. I feel like I was more prepared for quicksand than like most other real life problems,
things,
like getting kidnapped, talking
that
to strangers,
like crocodiles and alligators. I thought so much about.
Why do you think kids these days still think about quicksand, or were
Write in?
Yeah, let us know if you're like 6 years old. I hopefully not.
I don't think any 6-year-old has made it this far in this episode.
That's so true. No, I think about that. To me, quicksand is like roly-poly, so it's like kids only. Unless you have a childlike wonder.
And what should I do? I'm seeing roly-polies all the time. All the time.
So it's like, okay, quicksand. Sometimes I think about it.
But I'm not like, oh, wish it was here.
No. Yeah. And I'm not like scared to step on sand because I know how to get out. I just like go really slowly. It's the whole thing. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know how to conclude this. I don't know how to conclude my thoughts.
Talk about the past like year. How has it been? Now that you are on meds. And you said like, I still sometimes get bouts of depression. Like, what is that like? How do you get out of it? Or what do you do when you're in it? Like, walk me through it.
I think for me, like the telltale signs, and I also want to make another episode about PMDD because my period really affects my mental health. I think a lot of women's to an extent that we shouldn't have to deal with that isn't talked about enough.
Absolutely.
I don't even want to get into that right now, but usually it will be
so existential. It's horrible.
It's horrible. Awful. But it'll usually be around my period, and for me it's a lot of like the first telltale signs are the sleepiness. Like I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed, and then usually the thoughts follow that are like, you're worthless, everybody hates you, etc., etc. And I think that being friends with you and also my therapist have really helped my self-talk, and that's kind of what keeps me from getting like so deep into the depression that I can't get out of it, where I'm like, I like can stop myself and be like, okay, that's like not a real thought, or that's like a mean voice in my head who's being mean to me, and I can like rationalize that that's not logical. So I think the self-talk is so important. It's so cliche, but it's like, it's the home you live in.
The words you speak become the house you live in. And when I met you, you had horrible self-talk.
It's like apparent to everyone around me. I actually could not stop saying mean things about myself.
Yeah.
Anything anyone asked me, I was like, I don't know, this stupid fucking shit because I'm a piece of shit. It's like, girl, what is wrong with you? Like, shh. I cringe thinking about it now.
No, I don't think it was cringy, but I remember like I would introduce you to people and be like, "What do you do?" And you were like, "Nothing." Like, and I'd be like,
I was like,
"That's
"It's just stupid."
true."
You're like, yeah, why? Yeah. It's so sad. It's like leaking out of you everywhere. This like big cloud above your head. It's awful.
And you're almost like, if I say it first, no one will say it about me, and it's like a
Exactly.
defense mechanism.
It is.
It's the worst.
It's so awful, and it's just, it's so awful. But it's like life without depression. Obviously not without depression, but like without being constantly depressed. Crazy. I have friends. I leave my house. I brush my teeth. I shower. I have hobbies. I do things for fun. Like, it's insane that life can be like this. And I just feel really, really passionate about psychiatric meds. And I don't think it's for everyone. And I think everyone should make their own decisions for like their body. And
everyone's going to talk to their doctors, do their research.
right, whatever's. But it's like, if the only thing stopping you is like fear and the propaganda and like stigma and all of it, I just hope that I can be an example of someone whose like life was changed through meds. Like I would never have been able to make it here if I didn't have meds.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self if you could, if I put her in a room with you?
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm not really feeling great.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like, I don't know, because every version of me was different. Because 20-year-old me was like on one. She was not okay. But like 23-year-old me in COVID, who was like wanted to die. Oh, it makes me want to cry thinking about her. She was so sad. I think I would have just told her that like it's real. Like depression is real. Like it sucks.
You're not going crazy.
You're not going crazy. You're not broken. Like this is like real mental illness.
Yeah.
And like you can get help. And like you're still like a valuable person outside of it. I just needed someone to validate me so badly, and like people really struggle with that. I think that's like the advice I would give to people who have friends or family that are depressed. And also, like, I haven't talked much about anxiety. I do struggle with anxiety. It's not at all as bad. I feel like people usually have like one more than the other.
Yeah.
I am anxious. Is that why you're...
No. I thought that was so silly because I'm always talking about like Mr. D and Mr. A. And some days like Mr. A is there.
Out and about.
Yeah. Sometimes like that's why I was smiling. No. I wasn't that. No. Oh my god.
I thought you were like, no, bitch, you're anxious too.
No, that's horrible. No, you are like.
I am anxious.
You are, but like I wasn't. That wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I love your little faces. I'm always trying to read into them. But yeah, two more things I want to talk about really quickly, very passionate about. And this is just me being defensive.
You don't have to be quick. This is like our podcast. Like
that's
no
true.
One's cutting us off.
That's true.
Yeah.
I saw this TikTok once that made me so mad, and it was this girl comparing anxiety to depression and saying how much worse anxiety is. And I think anyone would get defensive. Like, I think if someone made a video saying depression is worse, people with anxiety would also. I don't think it's like a suffering.
It's not the Olympics.
It's not the Olympics. It doesn't need to be compared.
Yeah, no.
It's not like, I don't know. That just like hurt because it felt invalidating. So many things feel so easily invalidating where it was like, well, depression's not that bad because you just like would lay in your bed all day. Well, what's wrong with that? It's like, I guess if that's your perspective, I don't know, it just really bothered me. So I just want to say, if you're having any of those thoughts, it's like, no, it is as bad as you're feeling. Like, it sucks. It's awful. Like, the worst thing I've ever experienced. Wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like there's such harmful rhetoric around psychiatric meds, and I specifically saw this clip on the Joe Rogan podcast. I couldn't find it. I was researching before this, and I guess he's made a lot of really like problematic and harmful comments about SSRIs and antidepressants.
So
where
it was
it's like,
getting lost in the.
Yeah, where he's like, "Girl, go on a walk. Like, why would you need an SSRI? Just go on a walk." And it's like, okay, oh my god, wait, I didn't think of that. Thank you so much. Like, but it was like he had some professional on saying like, you know, kids these days, they get a little sad and they just pop an SSRI, and that's crazy, and people need to learn how to deal with sadness and anxiety, and that's why kids are so weak these days mentally. And it's like, I just think obviously depression and anxiety is more prevalent than ever because of social media. Like, I don't think the rates raising are because people are becoming weaker. If anything, they're just like the stigma's going away and people are feeling more comfortable getting help.
And I think we live in a time where we're just becoming more and more isolated, which is a result of like social media and the ease of next day delivery and like all of these things. You can live in your home, never leave, and live a functioning life.
Yeah.
Which is not really
like
existed.
Functioning, but not like happy, maybe.
But like you literally can, if you're happy, be at home and never leave also and be fine.
Yeah.
So like when does that start spiraling? You know, you can make friends. Again, air quoting, like you can keep friendships alive from the comfort of your home. You can do everything from the comfort of your home, it seems. So people are, that is a separate conversation. Maybe we can make a different episode entirely about like being sad and getting over being sad, or like being heartbroken and like, you know, dealing with comparison and loneliness. And those are all really valid feelings. And I do think I agree with some of the stuff about like Gen Z not having some kind of grit that other generations have had and resilience. But I think those are just two completely separate conversations. It would have been entirely irresponsible of us to even include those things in like this episode. Right? Because
to like compare them.
Because those are two valid things, but just completely separate.
So different. Yeah.
Like loneliness and comparison and sadness is all skyrocketing, and that's a different conversation than being severely depressed and suicidal and needing SSRIs.
Yeah. And I just don't really think people are thrilled about the idea of taking SSRIs, like really anyone. Like there is so much like fear mongering around them that I don't think people are popping them like they're candy. Like I think it's scary and I think it's shameful, and I just think these professionals talking like that is just so insanely harmful. And like those were the reasons I waited as long as I did, because
is Joe Rogan a professional?
No, but he had like a professional on the podcast talking to him.
Okay.
I think she was like a therapist or a doctor of some sort.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I couldn't find the clip, but like I swear it happened. I just think insinuating that there's something that you could do other than meds, and meds are the easy way out, is like so irresponsible and so out of touch with what it actually is like to be mentally ill. And I just want to validate that, like, I know that if you could go on a walk and cure your depression, you would. Like if you could eat a salad, eat better, whatever it is that people are telling you need to do, I just want to validate that, like, yeah, you would be doing that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Of course it makes sense. And like all those good habits can come after.
Yeah. And it's okay to try it, and it's not permanent. You can stop if you don't like it. You know, like I just hope that if anyone is literally just simply not taking them out of fear and they are really, really struggling and suffering, like I just hope that you can maybe feel a little bit more inspired to just know that your life doesn't have to be like that.
And you can talk to a doctor.
Your life does not have to be miserable. Like, yeah, you could survive, but like you don't have to feel like you're drowning every single day.
And maybe for people who live in households or don't have friends who like validate them or make them feel like what they're experiencing is real.
Yeah.
That like this episode can be a wake-up call, a lighthouse
of hope. Yeah. And I'm gonna talk about this a lot more, and I have a lot more to say. And I don't want this to be like a soapboxy episode. Like I feel like we barely giggled, and I feel guilty. I'm feeling guilty about talking about myself so much. But yeah, I just really want to help people somehow, and I don't know the right way to go about it all the time, but I don't want people to feel alone or think that it's going to be like that forever, because it really doesn't have to, and it's okay to get help.
It's strong to get help, and it's brave to get help.
It is really, really brave to get help.
And your life exists on the other side of getting help.
Totally, yeah. And I'm just so excited for people to meet the non-depressed version of themselves. Because I love her. I love me. I love this girl. She's great. And I could never say such a nice thing about myself 2 years ago.
I know. Even 1 year ago, dare I say.
Even 1 year ago. Yeah. So true. So yeah.
I love you.
I love you. Thanks for listening.
Of course. I love listening to you.
Thanks.
1, 2, 3.
Mwah!